My nose is itchy. Hey, what's up, YouTube? It's your girl Miranda, and I've got a fun video coming at you today. My last couple videos have been on the heavier side, and I wanted to make something, fun and light and highlight my current favorite card game, Star Wars Unlimited. Now, I'm no stranger to card games. I did play Magic the Gathering professionally, after all, once upon a time. I played many other card games as well, including other games published by Fantasy Flight. For full disclosure, I used to work for FFG as a playtester on the X-Wing miniatures game, although I currently have no business relationship with them. I just happen to like a lot of their games. X-Wing is actually how I came to be entangled with Star Wars Unlimited, as that was my previous lifestyle game. I even flew to Chicago to compete in the World Championships at Adepticon, so it was something I took fairly seriously. Unfortunately, X-Wing was discontinued this year, and I found myself with a gaping hole in my life. I didn't take the news well. There was a lot of shitty things going on in my life at the time already, and losing my favorite game sent me into a deep depression. But life goes on, and so I sought another lifestyle game to take its place. A bunch of my online X-Wing buddies were playing this new TCG, and to be perfectly honest, I thought the cards were ugly. Oh no, what have they done to my boy, Bill Burr? What is this face? But I was really missing hanging out with my friends, and well, it's been a hot minute since I played cards. So I read the rulebook and played a couple demo games and begrudgingly admitted that the game was actually really well designed. So then I signed up for one of my local pre-releases for the second set, Shadows of the Galaxy. And then mistakes were made. I should order some cards. Actually, I didn't quite go as deep as I would have liked for reasons I'll get into later. Suffice to say that this is probably the best card game I've played since Android Netrunner, which is saying a lot. I don't miss Magic, like, at all. But something about this game is scratching that long unscratched itch that I had for TCGs and has awoken some long dormant neurons in my brain. The highest praise I can think of is that it has fully engaged my autistic hyper-focus mode for the first time in a while. So let's get into some nitty-gritty mechanics. If you've played other TCGs before, Star Wars Unlimited is going to be a cinch for you to learn. I think the closest comparison that I can make is that it's a cross between Magic and Star Wars Destiny, without those god-awful dice, thank the maker. I'm going to be using a lot of terms from Magic since I'm guessing most people watching this video will have at least some familiarity with that game, but hopefully this will be clear enough to anyone to follow along. Unlike Magic, Star Wars Unlimited is a sequential game. By that I mean each round or phase consists of players alternating actions until they both pass, as opposed to one player taking all of their actions and then the other taking all of theirs. The card type should be familiar to any Magic player. You have units, which are your creatures. They have a cost, a power, and a toughness, and many have special abilities. They're also subdivided into ground and space, but we'll get into that later. You have events, which are your sorceries. It's a card that has some effect and then gets discarded. And then there's upgrades, which are your enchantments. They're like cards that go onto units to buff or debuff them. There's also two special card types. There's leaders, which if you've played Commander are similar to, well, your commander. They're a special version of units that are double-sided. You start in play with your leader, and they give you some bonus effect, and then later in the game you can deploy them as a unit. And then there's bases, which function as your life total and also determine which colors you can play in your deck. And that's pretty much it in terms of all the different cards. Now some of you might be asking, well, what about your lands? Or for you non-Magic people, where are your resources? Well, all of your cards are lands actually. At the start of the game, you're going to select two of your cards in hand to play face down as resources, and then at the end of each phase, you draw two cards and then you can select another card from your hand to play face down as a resource. This is the part of the game that I found the most difficult to learn the nuances of as a recovering Magic player. There's a great deal of tension in deciding which of your cards to keep and which to throw down as resources. Of course, sometimes the decision is obvious, and now that I've been playing for a couple of months, I'm used to it. But definitely when I was first learning how to play, I probably spent more time thinking about which cards to resource than how to sequence my actions. Speaking of, here's how your typical phase of Star Wars Unlimited goes. Players alternate taking actions until both players pass or one player wins the game. What are your actions? Well, I'm so glad you asked. Here are the typical actions you can take. You can play a card from your hand by paying its cost. You can attack with units. You can use an action ability. You can deploy your leader, which is technically a special case of the action ability. When you deploy your leader, you flip it over to its unit side and then put it into play ready. This is an epic action, which means you can only do it once per game. If your leader is defeated or would leave play, you flip it back to its leader's side exhausted. You can take the initiative, meaning you get to go first next phase. When you take this action, you forfeit any more actions for that phase and are considered to pass for your remaining actions. You can also pass, meaning you skip one action. You can still take an action on your next turn unless your opponent also passes or takes the initiative. There are a lot of keywords and abilities that will be familiar to longtime Magic players, such as analogs for trample, haste, first strike, or whatever. I'm not going to go through all the abilities and rules, but suffice to say that if you've played other card games, Star Wars Unlimited is going to be a quick game to pick up and learn. All right, so I just wanted to kind of illustrate how combat works and how the units work and how the lanes work in this game. So over here, this is kind of like just a regular board state, nothing super fancy. So this is my boss deck that I've been playing locally, that I won a store showdown with, hashtag humble brags. And this is kind of like a popular deck that we see right now is Han Solo. So I kind of touched upon this a little briefly earlier, but you'll notice that my leader has, the colors on my leader Bosk are red and black, and the base I'm playing is green. So that means I can play red, black, and green cards in my deck. If I did want to include any like off-color cards, they just basically become more expensive. Here you'll notice that there are units on one side and the units on the other side. So this is a game that has two lanes. They're called arenas. There's the ground arena and there's the space arena. So if you've played some other like digital card games, so what comes to mind is like Soulforge or like the Elder Scrolls digital card games, is they have multiple lanes. So in this game, your lanes are kind of fixed, so your cards will tell you which lane they go into. So like if I pull up Mall here, it says on the card, it says ground. Whereas if I pull up this A-wing, it'll say on its space. It doesn't really matter like which side the ground is and which side space is, as long as you match up with your opponent. So the way attacks work is when you attack, you can either attack your opponent's base directly, or you can attack one of their units in the same arena. So for instance, this Maul could attack this remote village, or he could attack one of these two ground units. He could go after Luke Skywalker, or he could go after Yoda. But he wouldn't be able to go over to space and attack the A-Wing or the Red 3 here. Similarly, if the A-Wing wants to attack, it can attack my energy conversion lab directly, or it can go after one of my two space units here. And that's basically how combat works. Now, there are a bunch of like keywords and abilities in the game that will complicate things a little bit, but I wanted to keep this nice and simple, so I'm not going to get into any of the like abilities on the cards. But if you're interested, I'm going to link to the rule book in the down below section if you want to learn more about the game. But if you played other card games like Magic or whatever, like they're going to be very familiar. And then just a quick note on leaders here is that your leaders are also ground units. So at some point in the game, and now each leader is different, but they all will can deploy at when you reach a certain threshold. So for instance, my Bosk here, it says on the card, if I control 5 or more resources, I can deploy this leader. So that's an action to do that. It doesn't cost 5 resources. You just have to have 5 resources. So let's say I had, like, I don't have the resources out just because I want to keep this nice and simple. But if I had 5 resources and I wanted to deploy my Bosk, let's say I'm deploying my Bosk. So I would flip them over to the unit side and just put them in the ground arena. Same thing with this Han Solo, also ground units. Also deploys at 5, so if my opponent had 5 resources, they could flip it over to the unit side and put it in the ground arena. So yeah, basically that's how combat works. Most games are won through combat. So like you notice the base will say how much health it has at the top left. So this remote village has 30 health, and this energy conversion lab has 25 health. This one has less health because it has a special ability. So I'm basically paying 5 health for that ability. All the regular bases have 30 health, and then the special bases have less health. This will keep going until you reduce your opponent's base to 0. If my units over the course of the game deal a total of 30 damage to this remote village, then I win the game. However, if my opponent does 25 damage to my energy conversion lab throughout the course of the game, then I would lose. Damage persists, including damage on units. So it's not like Magic where all the damage heals at the end of each turn. Damage will persist until either some card effect heals it or the unit dies. So just a quick example, if my Maul, who is a 7/6, meaning it attacks for 7 and it has 6 total health, if I decide to attack my opponent's Yoda, I would just do that by turning it sideways, just like in Magic. So I would deal 7 damage to the Yoda, which only has 4 health, which is enough to kill it. And then the Yoda would deal 2 damage back to my Maul, so that would reduce his health down to 4, or he would just have 2 damage on it. You usually can track that with like dice or with counters or whatever's convenient for you. If later on Maul gets 4 more damage on him, then he would also go to my discard pile. He would die. That's basically how it works. Like I said, I'm not going to go into all the special abilities. I just want to keep this nice and simple, just to illustrate how like combat works and how the ground and space arenas work. So, all right, back to the video. So I'm not going to pretend that the game is 100% perfect and there's no outstanding issues. The game is still very new, and the organized play for it is still getting started. Though it has grown on me, the art style can be a big deterrent for some. And I think the biggest issue with the game currently is the lack of supply. Your mileage may vary, of course, but where I live, Canada, it's very difficult and expensive to find singles and sealed products. Initially, when I wanted to try out the game, I told myself I'd play a couple drafts and see how I like it. Then I saw that none of my stores were running drafts. Then I clued in as to why. No one has any product. Fantasy Flight Games vastly underestimated the popularity of this game, and the demand for it far outstrips the supply. That's led to some pretty high prices for some of the more rare cards, although this is not even close to the most expensive card game out there. Still, even if I was willing to pay these inflated prices, I literally can't buy many of the key cards I need for the decks I want to play. None of the online retailers in Canada have them in stock, and shipping them from out of country is either not available or absurdly expensive. You might have better luck in the United States or Europe, but there's still the issue of inflated prices on both singles and sealed products. The good news is that all of these issues I've outlined are going to get better over time. At time of writing, the first planetary qualifier season is getting started, which is one of the ways to qualify for the World Championships next year. I'm already signed up for one. The art, I think, is getting better over time, and I've been impressed, or at least not embarrassed, by what I've seen from set 3 so far. And lastly, it's been announced that there's going to be a huge reprint of the first 2 sets later this year, so the supply issue is going to be less of a problem, and I expect prices to calm down a bit. I admit that I don't have a ton of goodwill towards FFG. I think their games are fantastic and well designed, but their long-term strategy with regards to the longevity of their games and the health of organized play has left a lot to be desired. I've personally been a refugee of a handful of dead FFG games. This company has burned me many times in the past. And yet, I keep coming back because their games are so dang fun! And for some reason, this time feels different. It really feels like they've thought this one through from the get-go. And this is by far their best-selling game in a long time, so they're definitely doing something right. Always in motion, the future is, so I'm not going to make any predictions, but I have a good feeling about this. If you're this far in the video, I must have piqued your interest by now, and you might be asking yourself how to get into the game. I find for these sorts of games, draft and sealed are the best ways to get your feet wet without committing to spending a few $100s on cards. And if you're a fan of the Clone Wars, well, I got some good news for you. The next set is right around the corner and is Clone Wars themed. In fact, many of the cards I've shown off in this video are from the upcoming set Twilight of the Republic. That comes out in early November. I played my first in-person games at the Set 2 pre-release, and I had a blast, so I recommend you check out your local pre-release if you have one. And if you're lucky enough to live somewhere that has Star Wars Unlimited draft nights, maybe check those out too. You can also play online for free, although there's no official online client yet. The two most popular unofficial ones are Tabletop Simulator and Carabas.net. There's also an official one currently in development called HoloNet. It's still in pre-alpha, but from what I've seen of it, it looks pretty slick. And I don't personally play online that much, but I know that's a good option for a lot of folks, so I thought I'd mention it. I'm sure you can find more info on those if you look around, and there are videos here on YouTube that go into more detail. Well, that's my spiel on Star Wars Unlimited. I've been having a lot of fun with it, and I hope you will too. If you're new to my channel, I usually do video essays, including the one I did on Dune earlier this year that did really well. I also have a collection of video game Let's Plays. Everything is neatly organized into playlists. If you like my vibe and want to support the channel, please consider hitting those subscribe and like buttons. That really helps out. We're very close to getting the channel monetized, and I'm hoping this video gets me over the finish line. Thanks for watching, and may the Force be with you. Okay, bye-bye. God damn it, now I have to clean all this up. Fuck. Oh my god. What lengths I go to for my art.